Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are outside of the White Garden underneath a beautiful Prunus mume tojabai, which is in flower right now. It is the end of January. We are very fortunate in North Carolina to have access to wonderful plants like this that bloom at this time of year, adding delightful fragrances and food for pollinators and all that sorts of stuff. It's just a beautiful day here. Today we've got a horticulture hour for you. We are doing an hour-long Q&A with questions from our live audience on Zoom. So those of you watching this on YouTube, we do this all the time. Be sure to drop by and join us live at some point. But our program today should be a whole lot of fun. So, actually, let's introduce people first before we get into it. Yeah. For sure.
I think we should.
I think we should. Why not?
It's only cordial.
It's only cordial. So we've got Greg Paige, our Director of Horticulture. Beside him is Tim Alderton, our Research Technician. Beside him, we are joined by Evan Villani, a former intern who is currently a guy who works here, I think. And then beside him is Dennis Carey, our Curator. And beside Dennis is an empty chair that may or may not be filled by a special guest who's not really that special. Mark might show up later. He might. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Alrighty. Those of you joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, we can get things started with our horticulture hour. But we do have a bit of a tradition on this hour-long Q&A, and this is an hour-long Q&A. So those of you joining us, if you have questions, please and thank you, put them in the chat so that we can pull them together and have them asked to our panel of horticulturists. But while we wait for that, Tim has gone around and collected a whole bunch of fun stuff. So you want to share our horticultural interesting things with us today, Tim?
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
Do you have any questions already or not?
We have one.
Okay, so that'll give us time to accumulate.
Yeah.
So we'll do some things. So actually, for about the last month, we've still had things flowering despite the little chilly weather we've been having the last 2 or 3 weeks. And now that we're in the temperature's warming, they're just gonna go like crazy. But this is one that's probably been flowering since the end of December anyways. This is Chimonanthus. I have to think. Chimonanthus praecox, and this is luteus. I have to think Chimonanthus or Chimonanthus. But anyways, this is a cousin of our sweet shrubs. So Calycanthus or Carolina allspice is another common name for it. But this is a winter flowering species, super fragrant. And it is commonly called winter sweet, and the fragrance on that is truly wonderful to have at this time of the year. It's actually it's almost done flowering. I'm going to say there are a few buds on it, but I was surprised that after last week's 12 degrees that we had here in the garden, that they might have been damaged more, but they really weren't. They are really hardy plants and great in our landscapes here. They take dry shade. I mean, so it's pretty easy to use that. Yeah, you smell them. And there's so many things in our winter landscapes that are fragrant when they decide to actually flower at this time of the year. So another
I feel
one.
like that one's been blooming way harder than it did last year.
Yeah, it looks really good this year.
It's glowing back there in our winter garden right now. Real good.
Other ones that we have several different hemamelis in the garden right now, are witch hazels. This is one of Mollus, and it's Early bright, yes, thank you. I couldn't even remember. This is one we've had in the winter garden for decades. It's just a really nice bright yellow colored one with, actually has a really nice center in it. It's kind of a burgundy shade to highlight that. But also they're fragrant, not as fragrant as the winter sweet though. But again, bright yellow, winter, and fragrant. Something that's not yellow, but I always love this one, is commonly called breath of spring, or the winter flowering honeysuckles. And this is Purpussii, Linicera purpussii, which to me, lemon and Fruit Loops, lemon and Fruit Loops together
That's a good
is
absolutely.
And you can force these so easily. You don't have to get them when they're totally open, put them in a vase of water, and in a few days you're going to have heaven in your house, even if it's still too cold outside. And this is super hardy. Might be seed around. I don't know if Perpusii does as much as its one parent, Fragrantissima, might be a little bit problematic further north. But it's not like some of the other honeysuckles that further north have become nasty monoculture weeds in open areas. But this is one to work into your landscape if you have it. And this will go right into zone 5. So as actually, I think the Hemamelis, and maybe only zone 6 for the Chimonanthus, or Chimonanthus. Yes. Thank you. I still
a cold zone 6 winter will do a lot of damage to
it might not get to be as pretty as this, but yeah.
All right, here's my hot take. Chimonanthus and Lonicera look really good for a couple of weeks while they're flowering, and they smell good. And then the rest of the time,
you put them in the back of the border where the breeze can come through them, and you can get them whenever it needs that.
Quarter-acre lot, it's hard.
It is, yeah.
And those of you playing along at home, Mark did just materialize out of thin air.
I've been here all along. What are you talking about?
And another one which I've taken for granted now for the last almost 20 years that I've been down here are the Edgeworthias. I ran into a fellow at our symposium this past weekend. He was new to the area. He moved here from California. And he says, I saw this yellow flowered shrub with these little things that look like a bee's nest on it. I said, yeah, Edgeworthia. And he had not heard of that. But so they're actually starting to flower already too. So this is cutting off of the one here from the garden that we named Snow Globe, which is a Papyrifera chrysantha hybrid that occurred here. And collected seed in 2006, and we sowed them out, and we got a few resulting seedlings, and this is one of them. But it's a little more compact than straight chrysantha. It's a little more resilient than Papyrifera, which tends to be a little bit problematic if we have cold or a cold spell in late fall and it hasn't totally shut down. So those were some of the fragrances. Other things I just have of interest are, and to reiterate, another of our programs coming up is the Maple Workshop coming up middle of February on the 15th. I think we have a grafting workshop. Yeah. But a lot of the Japanese maples look really nice at this time of the year. I have some of the outright twig ones. On my left hand, I have Wildfire. And then in my right hand, I have Bihu, which are glow, especially if you get the really nice twigs. I didn't cut this nice young twig on the Wildfire because I didn't have as much. I need some cyanwood here in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. But my Bihu is just covered with new growth, and it's spectacular right now. Put it in a partly shaded area that gets some sun in the winter months. Doesn't need it in the summer as much to get that color, but and with a dark background, and it just stands out beautifully. Just in general, a lot of your Japanese maples on the new growth, it's just beautiful and red through the winter, and you can see the structures. This is one from our mixed border, which is kind of it's a real compact one called Saiho, I believe, Saiho. And it has enormous new twigs on it, but they're all red as well at this time of the year and just stand out. To promote my propagation workshop this weekend, I also got a few twigs of some things that might propagate. Boxwoods are great at this time of the year. This is let's see. This is Buxus sempervirens. Is it Aria pendula? Or is it Aria striata pendula? Something like that. It's a variegated splash variegation on this one. We have this in our mixed border. And a Podocarpus. This is one of the New Zealand types, which actually do remarkably well here. A lot of plants from New Zealand loathe our climate here, but this is one, it's a hybrid called Orangeade, and it turns kind of bronze through the winter, and so it has really nice winter interest as well, but you can easily root these from hardwood cuttings, even semi-hardwood, and they're pretty resilient. Some other things just going on in the garden. I brought this we have a lot of birds in the garden right now, and if you walk through the garden, you might see some spots that are a little splotched in black. It's our birds eating our holly berries right now, which are just ripening, and they'd be delighted to eat them. The robins, bluebirds, and if you get cedar waxwings, they will gorge themselves on hollies, but they don't go after them until they are perfectly ripe. So one day that tree they won't touch it. The next day, It's all gone, and they are working their way through the garden right now. And so if you stop over here, you may see some of the results of that. And so don't be totally offended. It's just our bird population, but you may have them also in your own garden. And it is great to feed our native birds that way with something that is one of their natural foods. This is not one of our native hollies. This is latifolia, which is actually just adjacent to us over here. And they haven't touched this one yet, but they have gone after a bunch of other ones. Another fun thing for just winter interest, I love our cyclamens. And this is one that's perpetually one of my favorites. And this is Cyclamen heterofolium. And this is Ashwood silverleaf group from Ashwood Gardens in England. We've had this strain in our garden for years now. It predates me, and I propagate them occasionally. But the silver on these, it's really cool. On a frozen morning, they will be green as ever and look like they're frosted. They thaw out, and there's just this beautiful different patterns of silver on their leaves. And it's just a great plant. And you get flowers anywhere from late May. Now I often see them, but main flowering in the late summer and fall up until December, and even sometimes into January, but with a few of them. But then the foliage is there for another 3 to 4 months before it goes dormant. So long season of interest. And just something that's causing us problems in the garden and maybe causing you problems. You might ask us a question about our rabbits. And right over beside Blake is a fig that we have, and it's been gnawed on just slightly. So it's rabbits are out at night, and you may be finding some things that have been getting gnawed on. And it's like that no-see-um in the summer. What is eating my plant? It's probably rabbits if the bark is being removed. So, or little snips are being taken off and are piled up beside the plant. So just a few things to keep your eye out for in our garden here as well as your own garden.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Tim. Well, we did have some questions come in, and we can start off. Diane threw us a softball. Y'all ready for this one?
No.
Do you have any suggestions for container plants on a balcony which gets no direct sun?
How big of a container?
Oh, man.
Well, yeah, how big a container? And I assume, since she's asking us, she's talking about things that are perennial.
In my mind, the fun of container gardening is you can make it whatever you want. How big of a container? How big a container you got? How small of a container? Go for it. I'd be growing bonsai trees, you guys. Cram them in there, whatever. I'm saying follow your heart. Evan, what do you suggest somebody do?
Well, it was more of a question. I said, is pulmonaria good? Because we've been getting some of that in.
Okay.
For late winter, it'll start to flush, and that would be a pretty good one. It might work.
Pulmonaria might
like it cold.
The cold, it would be fine. It might not be so happy in the summer.
Yeah.
They can suffer a little bit. I'm assuming we're being asked about winter hardy things, though. For us, the Aspidistra elatior, it works great. I actually, on my front porch, I have big shallow pots of I do pyrosias in there, the tongue fern, which will just kind of fill in really dense, come over the sides. I've got some of the crested ones like shishi and koryu and some of the korayu. And they look great in these little shallow blue glazed pots, and they'll grow, and they're pretty drought tolerant.
I was thinking, if nothing else, Fatsias. That's why I was saying a larger pot you might want for that. But Eucharis, you can easily do, and they're fairly hellebores at this time of the year would be wonderful in that shady garden.
Well, a lot of hellebores have great foliage year round now. What I do in my few containers, I don't grow a whole lot. I'll put a woody plant in there. I like woody plants like Fatsia, but right now I've got one with a variegated loquat in it. And I'll plant it out later in my garden. I don't mess around with annuals, but I always, on my pots, I will always plant these woody plants. I'll always plant a ground cover. So right now I have some with some really bright ajuga in there, and some with our native Erigeron pulchellus meadow muffin, which is, a little low-growing plant, very drought tolerant. And it actually, when the soil gets watered, having that plant on top, even though it's taking up some water, it tends to keep more moisture in the container rather than over the summer it evaporating. And so, yeah. And, you if you grow annuals in a pot, you're ditching them every year anyway. So, if you grow a woody plant for 2 or 3 years in a container and then give it to a friend and plant something else, it's still cheaper than buying flats of pansies and begonias, every year. So
a really small pot, the cyclamens would go well in a shady spot. Yeah.
And they're super drought tolerant.
Yeah, they'll take the drought and the shade in a small, like a shallow little.
Well, and those are great for putting with other things in there because they'll pop up. If you got heucheras in there, those are evergreen. But you could do, if you had pulmonaria that stay evergreen but kind of retreat a little bit during the winter, you could have cyclamen popping up and growing through there. It's a great Daphne,
Carex.
Lanthus.
Artesia.
There's all kinds of great plants that you can
incorporate bulbs in there that are truly
basically anything that can
the answer, Mark.
anything that can grow in the shade. You can grow in a container in the shade. There are some plants that are tricky in containers. The biggest key is don't overwater, and you're less likely to if underwater if it's in the shade. Something in a really sunny spot can be a little bit tougher to deal with. So. Yeah, sky's the limit. Worst that happens is something dies. That just means you get to put in another plant.
And in a container, you lose some cold hardiness because the roots are more exposed to the.
Kind of why I was going. How big the container was. A bigger container.
And we're zone 8 here now. You won't necessarily want to put a zone 8 plant in your container. You might want to go with a zone 7 or a zone 6.
And for those of you with gardens and deer problems, one of the reasons I have my loquat in container is because I got it. It was very small, and deer have had a tendency to eat my variegated loquats when I plant them in the ground, or at least to try them and pull them up out of the ground. So I have that there, and now it's it's getting big enough that I'm going to be able to plant it out in the woods, and it's going to be able to be a little tougher when it comes to the deer. But I also have a pretty good size rhododendron in a container, actually out in full sun, that's doing great. And I get to see it flower because the deer haven't eaten all the flower buds off it like they do the rhododendron in my garden. So that's also a reason I use containers and grow woody plants in them. And this year I will take the rhododendron out and plant it out after it finishes flowering for me. I may never see it flower again.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for all of that. Let's go to the next question, shall we? Cindy has a question about hydrangeas. She says, I have 6 large mop head plants on the north side of my house. For several years, they've been affected by what the Extension Service identified as black spot. Flowers start out looking beautiful, but within a few weeks start getting larger and larger spots. I have pruned, trimmed off damaged leaves, and alternated spraying with funginyl and copper fungicide to no avail. Should I give up and pull them out? Should I move them? What might be a good replacement? And she lives in Wendell.
The climate-related plant ailments are going to continue to kind of grow and befuddle and be frustrating to most home gardeners. Most of that sort of damage is purely aesthetical. You're not going to have the pure colored flowers, and it's just one of those things that. And I think some years it's worse than others if you've got the right growing conditions for the fungal properties. And the timing of your fungicide is crucial. Usually when you see it, it's too late. You have to be a little bit more preventative and get it on. As the buds are breaking, that's the best time to do that for treatment. And as always, a disclaimer, read the instructions on whatever you're using. We're not prescribing and recommending that you go out and do that. If it's too frustrating for you and you need those absolutely clear and sparkly flowers, is maybe to try some different hydrangeas. Some of the ones that I'm trying to think of here, Invincible, those to me, I don't see those getting as many spots on the flowers. The Annabelle ones and those, maybe kind of switch to those. I do not like the macrophyllus and the ones that get all those, not just on the flower, but also on the leaf. You'll get leaf spotting on some of the leaves too. And there's ones that are more disease resistant, is maybe kind of switch to those and look for some of those as substitutes. Otherwise, it's just, it's the cost of doing business in the South, and with our climates and the weather doing different things, they're always going to kind of be present and a problem.
Have you seen black spot on hydrangea? I don't know exactly
not the same black spot that you get on roses and other things. It's probably a Psychospora leaf spot, or there's other things that get on flowers that are causing those spots. It's not the true the rose disease.
I've
never heard of black spot on hydrangea.
I don't know what that is. I've seen leaf spots and things like that, but not much that affects the flowers.
I wondered if it was associated with watering practices.
Well, that's what I was going to say
too, is a possibility.
I would guess, based on, said 6, Blake, is that right?
6 on the north side.
That these are foundation plants, just the way they're described. So they're probably up against the house. They're on the north side. So they're not getting a lot of air movement at all. And they're not getting any sunlight, which hydrangeas take shade. But so you have more moisture sitting on them than you would if they were out a little more open. And so that can lead to some botrytis in the flowers and things like that if it's really the flowers that are going down. The best thing you could do is, if you have 6 and they're getting pretty big and they're crowded, is to take out a couple of them and allow for a little more air circulation. And then pruning, when you prune them, what you want to do with a hydrangea macrophylla is go down to the base and prune some of the oldest, biggest limbs out, and that opens it up quite a bit. And so you want that air circulation. And then if you have lawn there or something and you're doing sprinklers or anything like that, that's exacerbating the problem. Big leaf hydrangeas will flag during summer and look like they need a lot of water. They'll be perked back up by the next morning.
And if you do have to water in the morning so they have time to dry out. You don't want to do it at night when that foliage is going to stay wet and make the conditions for the fungal problems to be
exactly.
present.
And if it doesn't stop, yes, rip them out and put in something else.
Beautiful. Love it. Okie dokie. Charles wants to know, what is the best viburnum cultivar of similar size and habit to cross-pollinate with Allegheny viburnum and ensure good berry production on both plants? He's in zone NC 8A, and they will be planted in sun to part sun.
So this is a retidiphyllum, right?
Yeah, I think.
Viburnum retidiphyllum Allegheny.
Sure.
So you could do another retidiphyllum cultivar. You could do a hybrid like Progensi, Viburnum X Progensi would be another one that would be good for a pollinator. I'm not sure what else would pollinate a leather leaf or Allegheny. What else would pollinate those?
Can't think of anything else.
I don't think of growing them as for fruit so much, but I guess they can.
They can, yeah. I mean, you can even plant another Allegheny, and that will help. But yeah, if you can get just straight retidiphyllum or another cultivar or Viburnum X Progensi types, that would be your best bet.
Awesome. Okie dokie. So Marilyn's asking a question about the witch hazel you showed. She says, does that cultivar of witch hazel hang onto its leaves so that you cannot see the flowers, or does it drop?
This one still had some of them on. Yeah, that's part of the reason I left it on here. You might get a question about that. Some of them are more prone to it than others. I mean, this is when it's been in the winter garden. It's kind of in a sheltered spot, so it doesn't get a lot of airflow to it that might help to knock things off. So that could be part of it with this one, but I can't say whether it is or not. Do you know?
Most of the mollusks will hold on to their leaves, some more than others. Some's it different. It's kind of a cyclical thing. It's not always. Some of the older cultivars, and this is an older cultivar, hold true to that. Excuse me. I have worked in gardens where we deadheaded all those leaves off.
I do it at my house now.
Sure.
Right.
It's really satisfying.
It is satisfying, and you get to see the pretty flowers. I actually think this adds interest to the winter garden, both in color and in sound. I don't think that's a terrible thing. To quote our good friend Doug Ruin, brown is a color. I think it adds some winter interest and some movement. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But yes, the mollas tend to hold on to their leaves. Marcescence is the term for that.
Yeah, I do cut mine off to see the flowers, and I do cut them off. If you pull them off, they hold on tight, and you'll often rip off flower buds if you're doing it before it flowers. So it does take a little pair of snips to do that. But I do it. I'm sorry, not I do it then, but this time. But tell people now this is a little unusual, and this is because it's growing in shade. In that you're getting flowering all the way out to the tips. Often with witch hazels, you'll get flowering, especially on the intermediate types. You'll get these flower buds. They're real prominent. These flower buds before they open look like this. You can see those, and they grow on the slightly older wood. And so they'll set all their flower buds and grow farther out. And so I will go in after the flower buds are set on there, and I will prune that longer growth out about half or 2/3 back. And now the next year, the flower buds will be kind of concentrated, but there'll be a lot of them. And it keeps my plants more compact because witch hazels can get big, and I like to have a lot of plants. So I do that, and I do that from a young age and keep them cut back. So when I do that, it's after the leaves have turned brown, but before the flowers have opened, and that's when I snip all my leaves off as well. But I learned that from somebody who grows a lot of witch hazels in England. He does that, and they're just spectacular when they flower. And like I said, they live in a smaller footprint than they would otherwise.
Okay. So let's see. Cynthia says that she had 3 Mrs. Schiller's Delights viburnum that were planted 5 years ago. One of them started to decline about a year ago. It looked stressed, the leaves turned reddish, and it did not grow as much as the others. Then she noticed shoots coming up from under the plant with leaves that looked similar, but not exactly like the rest of the plant. She says the shoots were spreading all over the area and were quite vigorous. She's having trouble identifying what they might be, possibly Euonymus fortunii. She says they finally dug the plant up that had continued to decline, and now a second one is doing quite poorly and has lost many of its leaves. Do you have any ideas?
I can tell her what the suckers are. It's the viburnum itself. We actually have another viburnum obovatum right in front of us, and I think everybody can agree there are small colonies that have sprouted up adjacent. They are naturally a colony forming species. So you will get that. It depends on the environmental conditions on what might be causing the decline in her plants. But I can say that that's what the plants are that are popping up.
Yeah. My guess would be too much water. They're, they naturally grow in sandy soils. That suckering is part of that kind of behavior. So they can kind of plants in wet areas and plants in sandy areas will tend to do a lot of that type of suckering. Although they grow in kind of dry sandy areas and wet areas. So I don't know what would be killing it, but those root suckers will come up very vigorous. It's not like a grafted plant that's reverting. It's just they start off very vigorous when they grow from the root suckers. But I don't know what would cause it to go downhill. Anybody else have any thoughts?
Big, for whatever reason, sapsuckers will rip them up pretty good. A lot of viburnums, but that's something that's really visible. You would see the pock marks all up and down the stems. There's insects. There's viburnum borers that will affect stressed out plants. And
Miss Schiller's Delight's so tight, though.
It is.
It would be a tough one.
I don't know much that does that. When you first asked the question, the thing that went off in my head was too much water.
Mm-hmm. I think environmentally, I think that would be the biggest thing. We started really liking them after the 2007 100-year drought because out of all our viburnums, the viburnum obovatum types were rock solid.
Awesome. All righty. Marilyn wants to know, does Edgeworthia propagate easily from cuttings? There are a lot of thin sprouts coming up from the roots of a 20-year-old one. Can I cut those out to root or maybe get lucky and get some roots with them?
Mm-hmm. Exactly what she
Both
said.
of those, yeah.
Yeah. they're relatively easy, both from softwood and hardwood cuttings at this time of the year. But if she has shoots coming up from the base, you can actually yank them up and they'll often have a few roots attached to them. And those are easy head starts to getting to the go. But otherwise, you can take a cutting about like this, maybe a little bit shorter, put some rooting hormone on it and put it in media, and you can get a plant that results from that fairly quickly.
And if you'd like a piece of this snow globe,
In our
you can
class.
you can take the propagation class and root it right from here.
No kidding. Awesome. I want to ask another question that actually came from YouTube. It was from Larry. He watched the Uruguay video you did last week, and he was looking at the Acacelloiana and how it's difficult to propagate them. He wanted to know if you've ever tried bottom heat underneath the cuttings of Aca.
We did or not.
You know, my experience with bottom heat a lot of times is that it'll help plants root quicker. But you know, there's some other nurserymen who specialize in Aca that I've talked to, and they've tried almost everything, and that has not seemed to help a whole lot. Now, I haven't tried it, so it could possibly help out. You know, usually when I use bottom heat, I do it on more like hardwood cuttings during the winter, and I like to keep the top of the plants cool and the bottoms heated. And I don't think that would be the best route for pineapple guava. I think if you keep the tops pretty cool, that you're not going to get a whole lot of movement on them. But I could be wrong, so I have not. Is he rooting them at 100%? Is that what's going on?
I really doubt that.
I think I stuck hundreds of them and rooted one.
Yeah. Oh, well. All right. So Laura says that she has a Sarcococca sweet box that it's in a good place. It's in part sun, moist to average soil. It's spreading and had small white flowers last year, but no scent. She said she planted it by a walkway for winter scent, so she's disappointed. And do we have any suggestions or ideas of what's going on?
I think I have one time in my life smelled a sweet box.
Okay.
They are not fragrant to me at all.
I smell it. I can smell it.
Yeah, the ones on campus are all, they're all great.
I almost cut some today, but I didn't see any right offhand that were in flower. But yeah.
So I thought would be that are some cultivars fragrant and are some not?
Mark has the most unique sense of smell of anybody, so he's not a judge. I've never not smelt it. It usually is like, and
it's just a really pleasant.
It's one of the first things to do its thing when you've been through a long, dreary winter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure what's going on. Maybe you have the sense of smell that Mark has.
It could be. There are definitely things that I can smell better than others. If it's a real lemony scent, I can usually smell it much better, like Daphne Odor or Magnolia grandiflora or something like that. But some of the other ones, that's why I like osmanthus so much. I can smell it. You know, give it a year or two. Sometimes there's weather that's a factor in there. You know, depending on when you're going out and smelling it, sometimes things release those volatiles like in the afternoon, in the evening. I don't know if sweet box is one of those.
Sure.
But like I've gone out and smelled ginger lily in flower and been like, this has no fragrance, and then gone by it at 4 or 5 o'clock and be like, whoa, it's going to knock you down. So yeah, but I don't know. But speaking of a good woody plant to put in a container on a balcony, Sarcococca would be a great one.
No doubt. I've smelled Sarcococca on a cold day and it was underwhelming, but on a warmer day it was nicer. So that might have been part of it. The
other thing I was thinking, if it was on a cold day, she was trying to smell it. It's like your nose itself. You get stuffed up.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Charles says he has a good population of the native jack-in-the-pulpit Eracema triphyllum and would like to try Eracema consanguinum, the Himalayan cobra lily. Are they a good fit here in North Carolina Zone 8A? Yes. Lots of nodding. Nodding indeed.
There are a lot of the Eracemas that are good around here. That's one. Yeah.
You've collected them several times.
Yeah. They grow in Taiwan. They grow in China. They're great for here.
No kidding.
And that leaf is so cool.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with it, you know, our native has triphyllum. It has 3 leaflets to it. It's one leaf, but 3 leaflets. And the Erythema consanguineum comes up, and it's what they call pedatisect. Is that right?
Oh, wow.
I mean, we'll
Wait.
believe you anyway.
No, it's a wheel. It's like a wheel.
Yeah,
Right.
pedatisect is the way
When
some
it
of where it comes up
splits.
and then it splits in half.
Yeah.
And now I'm having
I don't remember what that would be called.
having trouble remember what you call it, but it comes up and it's like an umbrella. Just all the leaves come out. And some forms of I've seen consanguineum forms that are 3+ feet tall, and that leaf on the top is almost 3 feet across, the long drip tips. But then there are other ones with thin leaves. Usually you get something in between that when you get them, and sometimes they're confused with another species. Quite often by people like me who say that it's consanguinea when it's really iridescens or something like that. But
No kidding. Okie dokie. Jared says that he dropped down to -6 degrees Fahrenheit a couple of nights ago in Pennsylvania, and his Acer levigatum honglong lost its leaves. Is it most likely toast, or is there a chance it will defoliate but still have some viable buds?
wow, -6.
That worries
It'd
me.
be cold. Jared, it will. One of the nice things about it, it will drop its leaves if it gets too cold, and that will help with survivability. If it survives this -6, please let me know. Please let us know. That would be something we would be very, very interested to hear. These extremes. I'm guessing probably not. -6 is real cold.
Ours has been to like 3.
Yeah, ours have been to 3,
For sure.
6, 3 out in the open under the high shade, probably closer to 6 or so. But 12 degrees between 6 and -6 is a whole lot.
That's
No
cold.
kidding. Yeah.
And it depends on that duration and also the temperatures coming up to that drop in temperature.
Presumably where you are, it was already good and dormant going in. That helps,
So that,
but
yeah.
Yeah. Grateful we're here in North Carolina. We can sit outside in short sleeve shirts on a January day. Okay. Marilyn wants to know if she can ask a question about houseplants. Well, Marilyn, you're welcome to ask the question. We'll see if we have an answer. She says she has a very old Dracaena with 2 5-foot tall stalks that are now leaning. She wants to know if she cuts one of them to the base, will it resprout?
Yes.
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 Have you experienced
Yeah.
with this, Evan?
Yeah. You just take your column, every 2 nodes, you can make a whole new one.
No kidding.
It'll come back from wherever that last cut is, it'll make 2 new ones.
Great.
And then if you only want one, what you want to do is once it gets big enough, you cut off the other one and you stake up the one you want to keep if you want it to come straight again.
Beautiful.
And you could probably use the top as another cutting.
Oh yeah.
No kidding.
They're really, not lucrative.
Easy. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Laura wants to know, she wants to try doing the Chelsea chop on a few flowering plants this year. When is the best time to try it here in the Raleigh area, zone 8A? It's generally done late May / early June in the UK.
I think she answered her own question.
Yeah.
Honestly, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the plant is
Depends
too,
on what
but
it is.
you might have to do it. It's like I have a couple salvias. It's like that are late flowering ones, which I've done them multiple times through the summer, and they're still good for.
let's step back just a second for people who don't know. The Chelsea chop is a term they use in England because they have the big Chelsea flower show and they want the plants to look good. So it's some of these taller growing perennials, they cut them down so that they'll reflush out and they'll be a little bit stouter and they'll be flowering at the right time. What I tell people, if you have tall perennials that flop around a little bit, thinking things like Joe Pye weed, some of the bigger salvias. What I tell people is for these late blooming things, I like to go in if they're up early and they're already up by, like she said, I say Easter, but Easter moves around a little bit. So, you can take that for what it is. You cut them about halfway back. And then again, even as late as 4th of July, but somewhere in that kind of late June, cut them back halfway again. And what you get is more stems, stouter. They won't get as tall, so they don't flop. But as long as you do it early enough, you get enough you get enough growth to still get good flowering on there. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Oh, and Jared has commented that he will certainly let you know about the Acer Hong Long, and he's got a variegated camellia that he got from Garden Treasures that Pat is also interested to hear if that will live through that. So I'm glad we've made you as a friend, Jared. You are a valuable resource as we're all learning about plants together. Like we're just figuring this out. So thank you for being a part of our community.
I was literally, this is not why I was late. But I was literally just earlier today writing for our e-update, kind of the director's note for our e-update for February. And I was writing about how I was hoping we would have gotten colder than 12, that I wanted to get down in single digits to test some of these plants. So
There's still time.
Although, as I say, I wanted to get in the single digits here. Not at my house. Here, they're all for evaluation. At my house, they're mine. I don't want them to die.
Honestly. Okay, so we still have time, y'all. Y'all can ask questions, but I do have questions that were rollovers from last time. Okay, so Roger had asked, for pot-bound plants, should I hose off all the soil to bear roots and then plant in the garden?
That's not a terrible idea. You are in essence bare rooting. It depends on what it is. You know, for some trees, that's a good thing. You don't want to spend hours and hours of time doing it, obviously, but if it's easy enough to do, yes. What's going to be crucial and important is when you plant that plant, is planting it at the right depth for that root flare. You don't want to plant it too deep now that you've lost some of that integrity. You may have to do put some soil in, water to settle the air pockets, and then some more soil. Take a little bit more care so that it doesn't flap over. You might need to stake it for maybe a growing season because it doesn't have that support of a true root ball. But and also any of those roots that you expose, take that opportunity to make them go out and away from the plant. Don't just blast out the soil and stick it in the ground. You're still going to need to manipulate that root ball a little bit to get those roots to go out into the garden soil.
And Greg, my experience is if you do what you said, which is, put some soil in and then wet it in and put more soil in and wet it in, then it actually locks in better than when you have that root ball that's sitting there that can twist around like that. So I actually think the staking, if you do it well, now there's a lot of times we say, oh, we're going to do it well, and you blow all the soil out and everything, and then go to plant it, and you're like, it'll be okay. Then you don't necessarily get that connection. It's, we talk about soils. Anything that anybody expert will tell you about soils is, the best soils are 50%, organic and mineral matter, 25% water, 25% air, something like that. And so that's true. Air is great. But when you're planting a plant, what you want is soil in contact with the roots. You don't want pockets of air. The air is in the soil. It's not pockets of it. So you really want to get that in. I don't really do that with my plants. If they're really root bound, I will take an old pruning saw that I don't use for pruning anymore, and I'll cut down the sides and kind of pull it apart a little bit. Sometimes, cutting the bottom, do it like a 4x and kind of pull them all out and, have a little mound at the bottom of my hole and sit that thing out there with those big things coming out. Sometimes you get those circling roots and they're just on the outside, and I'll kind of shave those off and plant it. But that's just because it's a lot of work to blast all that soil out.
A handheld excavator with the forks on it is really good for ripping up those root balls too. We call them root ticklers. That's a really good tool to manipulate.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep an eye on it. Be more aware of water for that first season because it's got fewer roots.
And to process that thing, if you are going to blow it out, you might let it soak in a bucket of water for a few hours in advance, and that'll help loosen things up and facilitate the removal of the media.
And this doesn't necessarily go with a root-bound plant, but often with root-bound plants, they're dry. Mm-hmm. And again, with planting them, we always talk about, dig the hole twice as wide, don't plant it too deep, all these kinds of things. But something that often gets missed when we're talking about that is you want the plant to be wet. You want that root ball to be thoroughly saturated, ideally thoroughly saturated for long enough that the plant is also thoroughly hydrated. So if you go out to plant and you pick up your plant and it is, light as a feather, feels like it's going to float away, it's not a matter of putting a little bit of water in there and it, till it runs over the side and then go digging a hole and putting it in, because it's not going to be wet. It's not going out and digging a hole and putting this dry thing in and then watering it in. The best thing is to get that thing fully hydrated, which means soil soaked through and the plant have, an hour or two at least to pull that water up. And if they're really dry, it can be hard to re-wet a potting soil. So a bucket of water and throw that plant in there until it sinks down all the way down to the bottom on its own is good. And, people plant things, they don't do that. They say, I've done everything that y'all told me and this plant died. And, sometimes we forget that, hey, there's a first step. Don't plant dry plants.
Okay. Yeah.
One thing that Bryce Lane just shared with me with pot-bound plants, what I found interesting was to prevent circling roots, which can girdle the plant later on. Like Mark said, you can shave it off, but he found specifically that someone did a study that if you cut off the remains into like a square, a pentagon, or a triangle shape, that completely eliminates the chance of circling roots forming. So like you have your circular pot, and then hack off big chunks of those roots, like soil knife. Works really well. That's what we do around here. So,
no kidding.
And that's another good point is it's one thing to have a root-bound herbaceous perennial or even a multi-stem shrub. There you worry about it being root-bound in terms of it not surviving early on, not taking up enough water. But if you have like a single trunked tree and it has girdling roots, it will choke the plant. We've had plants we've had to take out here that died because they were planted with circling roots. And 3, 5, 10 years later, they've
right when you start to love it,
and you take it out and you can see exactly what happened to it. So so with those trees, you really want to, and that's more than just pulling the soil out, because those big roots going around, you've got to get them cut.
Yeah, and pruning encourages growth. And when you've got a pot-bound plant like that, what you need is growth to get out of that pot-boundedness.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah,
you way to pay attention. Bryce is a wonderful wealth of information. So good on you there. Okay, Vandy says that she found some daffodil bulbs that she had squirreled away. They look and feel fine. She says she'll go ahead and plant them. She wants to know if she should plant shallower or deeper than usual, or just as usual.
I would do it as usual.
Yeah.
Just get them in the ground because it is getting late.
It is indeed. That was my first worry. Like, oh, geez, shouldn't you be doing that in the fall? But
I typically often get them in late. So that here at the Arboretum, we'll get them donated the first of the year. I've done that last year.
Oh, no kidding.
And so it was the first week in January last year, I was planting daffodil bulbs and they were fine. So,
and they may not flower the first year. That's the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Or they flower with the flower right at ground level.
Yeah.
It's not because you stored them for too long.
Yeah.
It's because you got them planted late, but
yeah,
they'll be just fine the following year.
Nice. Wonderful. Rachel is asking about holly shrubs. She wants to know when and how far back can she cut them back?
Why do you need to cut them back?
That's a beautiful question, Greg.
Because they grew bigger than they said on the label.
There's an often a misconception that everything that you put in the ground you need to prune and lay your hands on. I had a visitor ask me one time. She was awestruck about the garden. She had never been here before. She's like, "How do you prune all these plants?" Well, we don't prune all the plants. Reasons to prune are structural. If you've got something in a spot that might be too big to kind of get it under control, you want to direct a plant in a certain direction. They don't necessarily need to be pruned. A lot of hollies are, they're foundation plants. They're used for screens and things like that. They don't really require a whole lot of pruning. We're big advocates of promoting the right plant for the right spot. You don't want to put a Natchez crepe myrtle 2 feet off your front door. They're going to get super duper big. So I think a lot of times people have plants in the wrong spot, and they're kind of forced to do some pruning that they may or may not do under normal conditions. But just because you've got them in the ground, it doesn't necessarily mean they need to be pruned.
No
Well,
kidding. And especially this time of year when they're about to flower, like most people plant hollies for the berries, which are absolutely delightful. And oh, who cares about the flowers? You know who cares about holly flowers?
Bees.
The bees. Goodness gracious, those things are swarming in the springtime. And if you're brave enough, they do have a bit of a fragrance to them.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
Yeah.
They're really sweet. And if you're going to hack them back this time of year, you're just depriving nature of all of that wonder.
But I will say,
If
if you have to, hollies are about the most forgiving, especially of evergreen shrubs.
That's true.
They will, you can take a big old, 30-foot holly tree and cut it back to basically nothing, and it will come back. They call it hat racking, where you cut it and you cut all the branches, and all you got is this stick with nubs sticking out. And pretty quick, with 2 years, usually you've got a little pyramid again. But in another 5 years, it's got this massive root system for a 30-foot tall tree. And so where it took 30 years to get, or however long to get 30 feet tall, then it's going to take it 5 or 8 years to get that same size. And so you get in this cycle. So going back to where we started in this cycle is right plant, right place. So if you have hollies that are just way too big for the spot, rip them out and put something else in, because otherwise you're going to be constantly doing this.
No kidding. Okay, we're running low on time, but we have time for one more question. And I know we like to try to stump the chumps on our horticulture hour. So I think
We don't have any questions about mugwumps in Australia or anything like that, do we?
You mean yabbies?
Yabbies.
Come on, Mark. Common Australian crayfish. Everybody knows these things. Okay, so we're gonna. This is a fun one, all right? Charles says he has a couple of 3-gallon tree-form poinsettias in containers that are just entering dormancy. They're dropping leaves. He'd like to keep them going outdoors in his garden in the warm months and then overwinter them indoors and attempt to induce bloom next year. Any general tips for success?
Find out what lighting they need to go into flower, what temperature fluctuations they need.
Okay.
If you're doing that inside. But yeah, so it sounds like he's doing the right thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're referring to is how just like finicky the whole process of growing
inside
poinsettias.
Yeah.
Like it's a science that they're using, plant growth regulators and artificial light to get things on the right photo period and that kind of thing. So
and we've bred our poinsettias that are house plants in the winter to be like, get them done as fast as possible. So they're a little different than what a tree-form poinsettia is going to be. But I'm not sure, but it should be out there. That information should be out there.
The timing, if you want it to flower for Christmas, you have to probably adjust the lighting from what our natural photo period would be.
And off that, I wanted to say, if you could get it into its own room, that's good, because if you're turning on lights to get a midnight snack, you're going to throw it off.
Yeah,
So,
that's where it's good. And I don't think any of us grow poinsettias enough to be able to tell you the exacts on how to do this. But the deal with the poinsettias, they need this dark period, and it has to be unbroken dark period to force them into flower when we want them. So exactly, if you put it in a closet, give it to get that dark, or a spare room, but you go in that spare room to get stuff out regularly, and you go in there and you turn on the light, that really breaks that light cycle the way it needs to be. So there are some very specifics, and there's a lot of it online.
yeah.
If you go online and look at it, go to, something like the NC State Extension page. Don't go because if you go to just some other rando on the internet, the thing people love to do on the internet is make things more complicated, because that makes them an expert. The more complicated it is, the harder it is for you to figure out what the heck they're talking about, the more of an expert they are. These things are not that complex. There are recipes you have to follow, but you can do that.
I think 10 hours of darkness is the key.
Yeah.
And that makes
if you
them a
do
short
temperature as well, that helps. But I think I learned it in college, so I'm
Yeah.
a lot farther away from that.
Sure.
I've never
Yeah.
done it. But what you're going to experience otherwise is the stupid things breaking all the time because there's nothing more brittle than a poinsettia. They're going to drop all their leaves. They're going to get spider mites, and I'm negative when it comes to poinsettias. They are disposable. But I commend you for making this effort.
Yeah. For sure.
Kudos.
Yeah. Learning about plants, growing them out, seeing what you can do. There's just a whole lot in this world to explore.
Be careful because they are euphorbias and they have milky sap. And I have dealt with some tree form poinsettias at another botanic garden and sent my propagator to the emergency room because she was doing something and got a little bit of that sap in her eye, and she was wearing a patch for a couple of days.
Is that an allergy or is that a normal reaction?
It's a normal. It's this caustic latex in there.
Yikes. Okay.
Which is why deer don't eat euphorbias.
Well, there it is. Charles thought he could stump the chumps with his question, but we had a ringer. We had Evan on
Google it. That's
It's somewhere out there.
yeah, for sure. No worries. But anyway, thank you all of you for joining us for this Horticulture Hour and providing your wisdom and experience and expertise as we answered these questions for our delightful midweek audience. And thank you, our delightful midweek audience, for joining us today on the midweek program. We will be back next Wednesday. I think Mark's doing What is a Cultivar and Why Should You Care?
Yes. We're going to be talking about plant names, and it's going to be a lot more fun than that sounds.
No, it really is. You're going to learn a heck of a lot, for sure. It really is important. Really, what is it and why should you care? There are a lot of reasons to care, so it'll be a lot of fun. We hope we will see you all next time. Y'all take care.
There was this one time I went and quoted someone for pulling out a holly, but when I came back to do the job, I looked into the bush. I realized it had been a tree just a few years ago. I was like, I can't do this.
I'm out. That's a chainsaw and a trunk grind.
Yeah.